Okay, Hafiz, sorry I haven't been in class the last couple of days. I have been off at a professional learning day, learning how to use testing, psychometric testing to help students understand themselves a bit better and how I can target learning. So yesterday you should have completed a raft of activities from your textbook. If they haven't been completed, they need to be, because if you haven't done them, you won't be able to do the prac on Friday. So you had to do the two exercises, 3.6 and 3.7, and you also had to complete the scientific drawing of the fish, the prawn, and the calamari. And the reason is because we are actually going to go through the experiment now, so you can better understand it, so you can prepare yourself. So hopefully you can see my screen. You will get this sheet on Friday. In a hard copy, but you'll also get it electronically from me. So what are we doing? We've just looked at endoskeletons and exoskeletons, and we've also looked at vertebrates and invertebrates. You know that a vertebrate has a vertebral column or vertebrae, so a spine, and we know that invertebrates do not. And then we also know that from a skeletal perspective, we know that animals can have an endoskeleton, which means a skeleton on the inside. And we also know they can have skeletons on the outside, known as exoskeletons. Now already, whilst you're sitting there, I want you to think about our three organisms that we're going to be dissecting. The first one being a fish. Think to yourself, is that a vertebrate or an invertebrate? And is it an animal that has an exoskeleton or an exoskeleton? So that's for the whiting fish, I believe we're using. Secondly, when you think about a prawn, does a prawn have a spine? Does it have an internal or an external skeleton? And then finally, our squid or calamari, does that have a skeleton or does it not have a skeleton? And does it have a spine or does it not have a spine? Hopefully as you're sitting there, you're thinking about all of those questions I just prompted you with. And most of you should have the answers, and if you don't, that's okay. But I suspect that if you don't have the answers, it's because you didn't do the homework that was set for class. So that was doing copying the diagrams of the three organisms, but also doing the questions as well. So have a think about it. What do you think our aim is for this experiment? What are we trying to do? If we're looking at three organisms, what might we want to look at? So there are a number of different things that we can investigate in this task. And again, each aim will be different, but I want you to make sure that you follow the conventions of writing your aims. So for example, the aim of this experiment is to, and then finish that sentence. So let's have a look at the method. So first of all, so you understand, you'll be put into groups of 3. And in your group of 3, you will decide amongst yourselves who will be doing the dissection of the fish, who will be doing the dissection of the prawn, and who will be doing the dissection of the squid. You will all need to do that in one lesson, and you won't unfortunately get to dissect each of the organisms, but you will be able to have your own. So that's pretty exciting. Now, if you're not very confident in using things like scalpels, which is our knives, probes, or perhaps you might be a vegetarian or a vegan, or maybe dead animals or blood and that sort of thing make you feel sick. It's nothing to be ashamed of, but I must tell you and implore you that if you are feeling in any way unwell or uncomfortable, you need to tell me or tell Ms. Zanin, because we don't want you to faint and hurt yourself. So once you've decided in your group who will be doing each of the organisms, you'll follow the method that's applicable to you. So with your fish, you're going to observe the external features of the fish, and then you're going to carefully cut the fish half in lengthways so you can see the internal skeleton. And then you're going to observe the skeleton of the fish. Now, for those of you dissecting the fish, your task, once you've extracted the, or you've, I guess, separated the fish skeleton from the muscles and the fat, that's where you start to remove any excess tissue so that we can get a really good picture of the rib cage and the tail and the vertebrae, so that we can really look at the structures of that internal skeleton. Now, when we're cutting lengthways, we're cutting like you would be cutting straight down your belly button. So from your neck all the way down the middle, separating yourself in half, basically. So the underside of the fish, right? And from there, you'll gently use your scalpel or razor blade to separate the meat from the bones. With our prawn, now, I've prefaced this by saying with all three organisms that there will be a small prize for the best dissected animal. So for the prawn, it says peel the outside of, feel the outside of the prawn and then feel it. And then you're going to cut the prawn in half and observe the inside. Now the task for this one is quite different to the fish, in that because we have a prawn with an exoskeleton, we want to keep the carapace or the external part of our prawn intact. So we basically want to take the prawn exoskeleton off all the meat, have meat in one hand and an intact exoskeleton in the other. So that will be a task. So you'll gently use the probe to separate, sliding that in and separating the muscle and tissue away from the carapace, which is our external or our exoskeleton. And then you're also going to have a look at things like the digestive tract. You might even like to investigate what the head, inside of the head looks like, the eyes, and obviously do the same with the fish. This is a real opportunity for you guys to observe the different features of different animals and really compare them to us too. There will be some similarities, but of course there are going to be some significant differences. Now with the squid, this one again is a bit more challenging again, and I will have a video available for those boys to watch who would like to observe or do the squid. So you're going to feel the outside of the squid and then cut it in half again and observe the inside of the squid. Looking for things like the ink sac, you're going to be trying to find the pen, which helps keep or give the structure to the mantle, which is basically like the hood of our calamari. So as you can see here, you're going to have your organism or your fish on its side here. You're then going to turn it on its side and cut lengthways down the organism, okay? You're then going to draw and label the diagrams of each of the species of organism, even though you haven't dissected all of the animals, all right? Obviously here your prawn, you can see that the person here has separated the external part of the organism from the meat or the flesh. And then here, your calamari may look a little bit different to this one, so don't expect one to look like that. So remembering that with drawing our specimens, we are naming them, so their scientific name, and we're also putting a date. We're using pencil, we're not shading, we're drawing exactly what we see, and we're labeling it using a ruler. Okay, then with our discussion. So this really, I guess, requires you to start thinking about the safety precautions for this activity. So the first question here is, well, why is it important to wear gloves when dissecting? I should probably preface this by saying that everybody will be wearing full PPE. So that is our goggles, our gloves, and a lab coat. So the first question there says, well, why wear gloves? All right, well, I suppose it's really important that we talk about this. Whilst I'm sort of giving you the answers, it's important that you understand that we are dealing with a once living, now dead organism. When organisms die, they start to decompose. And as part of that decomposition, there are different types of bacteria that will live on and feed off the carcasses of these animals. And some of them will make you sick. And so the significance and importance of wearing gloves is to not only protect yourself from the disease, but then also from you possibly transmitting that to somebody else through, you know, perhaps picking up a pen and writing with it. So anything that you're doing with your hands, you must wear gloves. And then once you are finished, you take those off. They get wrapped up with the organism. You don't touch your pens, your paper, nothing, whilst wearing those gloves. Now, 2 safety rules here that are extremely important when participating in a dissection. Now, I will come back to this at the end because I want to show you the risk assessment that I've done to assist you in this process. Okay. Now, consider the fish. Where is the skeleton located? What is this type of skeleton called? And then the same sort of questions for the prawn, and then a similar question for the squid or the calamari. And then your next lot of questions asks you to identify which group of animals which group, invertebrate or vertebrates, does these organisms fall under. And then, of course, a simple question, but nonetheless important to answer. What would you be classified as, a vertebrate or an invertebrate? And now, with all the information you have gathered from this experiment, create a dichotomous key which outlines your understanding of the following species. Looks like something's been cut off there, but yours will be appropriately finished. So, risk assessments. Now, you may be sitting there thinking, okay, well, what do I need to do or be considerate of when conducting my experiment? So, importantly, we know that we all have to wear personal protective equipment as an absolute minimum when conducting our experiment. Now, I'm going to share my screen with you again. This time, the screen will show the risk assessment. So, you should be able to see that now. So, our experiment will be running this Friday. You'll all have a dissecting board, a scalpel, a probe, dissecting scissors, newspaper, prawn, calamari and whiting, gloves and a lab coat. So your dissecting board will be covered with newspaper, and it's a hard surface for you to cut your organism on. It ensures that you don't slip and that it's a safe, obviously, working space. Now, the first lot of identified safety issues are our dissecting scissors. So we obviously know that scissors are sharp. They can, stab, cut, slice. So whenever you're using your scissors, we know that if we're walking with them, the blade is down. We're not running around the room with them. Obviously, there's not going to be any naked flame, so we don't have to worry about being flammable. But what we will have to worry about is this newspaper will be touching our organisms, and it will be wrapping up the organisms in the end. And so we don't want to be leaving any newspaper around, and it needs to be disposed of safely. Miss Annan will direct us as to where to put that. Now, your probe. So think of your probe, if you haven't seen one before, sort of like a skinny pen. It won't look like this, but sort of similar in size, in length. It will have a nib on the end, which will be used to help you pry apart the flesh from the skeletons. Again, it's pointy, and so it could be, obviously we're wearing goggles, so it will protect our eyes, but we don't want to be pointing it at anybody or throwing it around. We need to be safe. Scalpel, obviously it's a blade, it is sharp, and we need to be cutting away from ourselves. So if you pretend that my hand is a fish, I'm not cutting up towards myself, I'm cutting out and away, so that if we slip, it doesn't slip in and cut ourselves. Now, we are dealing with once living organisms that were feeling, thinking, and had a life. And so we need to be considerate and not be disrespectful to these organisms. We don't want to be doing anything stupid like picking up the fish and shoving it in somebody's face, or poking it and prodding it in ways that aren't conducive to what we're trying to do with our experiment. It shows a lack of consideration and respect for the dignity of that organism. And so anybody that is doing that will not be allowed to continue. Now, key thing here, if anybody has allergies to crustaceans, fish, you can't participate, unfortunately. If you have respiratory reactions to these organisms, you may not even be allowed to be in the same room. But if you are just contact sensitive, you can observe, but you won't be able to dissect it yourself. Obviously, we don't want to be having anybody having any reactions in class. Okay, well, that's that. I will have another video available for you to watch that shows the squid dissection. So it will be worthwhile all of you watching that, so you actually get to see what you're going to be doing on Friday. And your replacement teacher will have all of the instructions necessary for you to complete your work for this lesson. Okay, well, I will see you on Friday. Have a great day, boys.